Welcome to the Cloud Pod, where the forecast is always cloudy. We talk weekly about all things AWS, GCP, and Azure. We are your hosts,
Justin,
Jonathan,
Ryan,
and Peter.
Episode 209, recorded for April 19th, 2023. The Cloud Pod whispers sweet nothings to our code. Why don't you work? Good evening, Jonathan and Ryan. How's it going?
Good. Great, Justin. How are you?
Yeah, it's another fantastic week in AI hell of cloud. It's just AI everywhere. So it's good. It's good times. But we'll get into that again tonight once again with more cloud AI because everyone's gonna have it. But other than that, it's good. What about you guys? Have a good, effective week?
Yeah, I had a good week. I was excited because conversations happened across Twitter that were relevant to the podcast, and then a experiment that I was running on my own, and so it was pretty good to sort of combine all those through, and I've actually had some real experience with some of the things that were announced.
That's awesome. Did anyone complain to you about not being here? And
Zero people have complained, which makes me feel very wanted.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they just didn't really care enough about particularly Kubernetes. And so they're like, no more Kubernetes. I don't want to talk about it anymore. That's probably what people are.
That's probably what we should do. We should have them at me if they don't want us to talk about it.
Yeah, that might be very true. All right. Well, let's get into it then. AWS news of the week. Codewhisperer is now generally available. And also now includes an individual tier that's free for use for all developers, which I was not expecting. So if you would like to use Codewhisperer and you do not have an AWS account, you can use it with just an email account and plug it right into your IDE of choice, which could be VS Code, IntelliJ, Cleon, Golang, WebSolar, Rider, PHP Storm, PyCharm, RubyMine, DataGrip, natively, and native tools like Cloud9 and Lambda Console all will have it available to you to use. And you can support, of course, Python, Java, JavaScript, TypeScript, C#, Go, Rust, PHP, and more. The only thing you don't get is security is limited, I believe, to only Python, Java, and one other language I'm forgetting. But that's it's nice to see that this is out and about. Price-wise, it's about the same price, I think, as GitHub Copilot, other than the free tier, which is free for you. But if you're an enterprise and you want to have enterprise controls, organizational management and policy management, how your code moves around, that's about $19 a user per month, which I believe is right about at the exact same mark GitHub Copilot is, if I recall the last time I looked at their pricing.
It's a neat product. I'll play with it. I'm super happy that they've launched with so many different languages supported, and so much support for different IDEs. It's a great launch. I still think it mostly replaces copy and pasting from documentation a lot of the time. The Boto 3 docs are very good, probably the best in the industry. And I think it does a very good job of sort of filling in the blanks in some regards in terms of copy pasting those API examples and things into code. But it's definitely a time saver. I'd pay the $20 a month for the service, even if there wasn't a free tier. Simply just to make it easy to do that boilerplate stuff. I'd like to see in the future, a bit more thought, I guess, is the thing kind of going into the software that gets built by these tools. Right now, it's very much a very junior engineer. It's like, go do this exact thing that I want, and it does a pretty good job of doing that. But in terms of designing an overall architecture or designing data structures and things, all the tools, including Codewhisperer, are still very much lacking in that space.
Yeah,
I really would appreciate something when you're working on a function that's like 9 layers down. It just pops up and you're like, are you sure? Do you think that maybe you should refactor this into a library or not this? Like that kind of sophistication, which is difficult, but I mean that would be nice because that's where I need to be saved. Because it's 3 a.m. and I've lost all sensibilities on what good practice is.
Yeah, I guess it has no forward-looking sort of considerations to, well, what does the next sprint look like? Mm-hmm. What's the next piece of work we're going to have to bolt onto this, and how's that going to work? And so I think it's going to come eventually. This is a great stepping stone. I expect the reason there's a free tier is so that they get much more data from user experiences. They'll be retraining the model based on people's feedback. Which choices do people choose? Because it's great that you can type a comment, write this thing for me, and then tab through many different options of things that fulfill the same request, and you get to choose your style that you want, or whatever, basically. So I'm sure that data will go back into the model and retrain it to start delivering things that people use more often with less human input, which is kind of scary in itself.
Yeah,
but
it's edging us closer to code writing code. For sure.
You thought identifying stop signs on a recaptcha was bad, but now you're basically training the model to put you out of a job. At least the more junior engineers, I'm sure.
Yeah, and the question is how do you become a senior engineer without being a junior engineer first? And that's always, I think that's going to be a weird challenge that we're going to have to face across a lot of industries.
It's interesting while you were talking about this and using it. Either of you tried the Copilot? Because it's also free for an individual.
No, I haven't tried Copilot.
Yeah, I get to understand how they differ. But it's interesting looking at the pricing. They have a team level, which is only $3.67 per user per month. And then they have an enterprise version of the $19. But the big differentiator on some of these things, yes, there's SAML single sign-on and the things that Amazon has in there just for $19.25. But they also they go from 500 megs of package storage and 2,000 CI/CD minutes a month in the free tier to 50,000 minutes of CI/CD and 50 gigs of package storage. So that they're giving you a lot more in their $19.25 than AWS is, because AWS is really giving you those controls and single sign-on. So that I would like to see maybe Amazon come up with some more stuff for their enterprise package at that price, because it seems more competitive to the $367 per month what they're giving you right now than maybe the $19.25.
Yeah, I mean that is sort of a challenge with Amazon, right? Like the way that they're managing the user access to these, moving it outside of the Amazon account, whereas your CI/CD tools are still very much inside that account. It is sort of a challenge, but I bet you we'll see it over time, or at least a blending across what is managed by the builder ID and what is within the Amazon account.
Yeah, it's interesting. The builder ID is only required for the free tier, but the professional tier you can use a regular IAM identity. So
I wish there was a way that I could get my free user though with my normal AWS account. That's my personal one. Versus having to get this AWS Builder ID, but I'll quibble about that later.
And there is a weird, you do have to have an Amazon account to accept the invite of the Builder ID. And I wasn't quite sure exactly what was being linked as I went through that workflow. And I this is a conversation Jonathan and I were a part of on Twitter, which was why? What's I want to know more about the strategy and what they're going with that. And I understand the differences, and I think Jonathan's right. They are trying to change it from, access within an Amazon account to, mechanized resources and get it more user exposed to direct user access.
Which makes perfect sense. That I get why they do that. It just,
I want to know the full story, right? And I know it doesn't exist yet, but it would be nice to see where they're going. And I haven't seen any write-ups that way.
Yeah, I like the idea of teams. I think Amazon probably missing out on something by not having the concept of teams, because I guess if you think about it, if you have a team of developers all using the same tool, Copilot, working towards a goal, then Copilot could learn potentially the style in which the whole team should be working and make appropriate suggestions, so that the code style and the application architecture sort of is consistent across an entire app stack, rather than each person individually deciding which style they particularly want for a task. But it's all good.
All right, let's move to the next thing. Amazon is excited to announce the release of Simple Database Archival Solution, or SDAS for short. It's an open source solution available under the Apache license, which can allow you to deploy in your AWS account to archive data to AWS directly from an OLTP database. This is apparently a common problem faced by many AWS customers, which is the need to efficiently and securely archive your data from the database to something cheaper like S3. This offers you the ability to connect to Oracle, MySQL, or MS SQL Server today, and it will automatically create all of the step functions, Glue, S3, and Athena jobs to move your data easily to S3. And this is all available to you as open source. So I do look forward to seeing support for additional databases like maybe Postgres soon. But this is nice if you're trying to do data archiving out of your database. I wish they had a little bit of ability to maybe allow me to rehydrate easily, but I didn't get enough into the experimentation with it to see if I could maybe reverse the flow. But it's still nice to have an option. I mean, that's really what we use Athena for, though, is to get that data back, I guess.
Yeah, and you could use Glue to rehydrate as well. You just have to you're a little bit at your own mercy there with getting it right. It'd be nice if it was more native.
Yeah, it'd be nice if the plugins, database plugins, which could actually pull this data back out of S3, albeit more slowly, but at least you could still have access, kind of like the cold storage for Elasticsearch in a way. I think it's going to open up some interesting problems in the future, though, because great, now we can archive the data, and yes, that's been a problem and gets us away from these 14 terabyte SQL Server database instances and things. But if you think about it, if you have a 7-year retention plan for data, the app is also going to be changing. The data structure is going to be changing over that time. So it's great that you can rehydrate data. It's great that you've got a copy of it, but is it usable in the future? And maybe some thought should go in now to, well, in the future, these are the types of things that we want to do with this data. Customers want this type of report, or we may need this type of extraction from the data. Maybe a service like this should actually incorporate those kind of ideas whereby you don't just store the data, but you also store some queries alongside it, so that in the future, if you want data out, they're already kind of pre-canned because your entire staff will have rolled over in that period of time. The data structure will be changed. You probably can't re-import it into data into the database and use it with the new version of the app. So I think in the same way that we have these like archives of floppy disks and CDs and DVDs, which in 20 years are all going to be completely useless, sort of obsolete data structures will also be useless. So I think some sort of thought needs to go into that in terms of usability of the surface over the long term.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear from the write-up that the purpose is not really to make that data usable, right? It's to store it for compliance and regulatory reasons, right? So it's like,
checkbox.
Can you get it out when the lawsuit's filed? I think is the success criteria, right? Like, so it's
yeah.
I mean, it would be a fun story to have to delete customers' data that's now gone through this pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's finally happened. I thought it might happen maybe at Reinforce, or maybe they do something, at another event, but they decided they probably couldn't wait. Amazon is getting into the AI business with some new tools for building generative AI, of course. This is an exciting inflection point, I guess. And most customer experiences and applications will be reinvented with generative AI in the next 12 months. So it'll be everywhere. Of course, AI and ML have been a focus for Amazon for over 20 years. Of course, not enough to be first to market, but third mover like Google is a good place for Amazon to be maybe in this one, because there's a lot of fighting to happen still in this space. So they're announcing Amazon Bedrock, which is a new service that makes foundational models from AI 21 Labs, Anthropic Stability AI, and Amazon accessible via an API. The Bedrock is the easiest way for customers to build and scale generative AI-based applications using foundational models, democratizing access for all builders. And the Bedrock will offer the ability to access a range of powerful this is so hard. Foundational models for text images, and including Amazon's Titan foundational models, which consists of 2 new LLMs. We're also announcing today through a scalable, reliable, and secure AWS managed service. With Bedrock's serverless experience, customers can easily find the right model for what they're trying to get done, get started quickly, privately customize their foundational model and with their own data, and easily integrate and deploy them into their applications using AWS tools and capabilities they're familiar with. And they also announced the Trainium 1 and Infinitum 2 instances are also generally available to power all of this new generative AI work you're doing out there.
I remember just lamenting about how like AI seemed to be like a tagline of every security or operations software that was being pitched to me and I thought there's no way it could possibly get worse. And what a fool I was, because it is really, you can't open a news article without it being somehow related to AI these days. And it's crazy to me that, how much it's going on, and I can't even keep up at all. Like, I don't understand how this service compares to, some of the work being done by OpenAI and what's being incorporated into Bing. Like, I don't even know how they relate. Like, it's crazy. Like, I know there's models. I know we train them. And I know that eventually I won't have to do any more work. But past that, I'm really lost.
Yeah, I don't think we're in a position to even predict what the space is going to look like in 6 months or even 12 months' time from now. I think that the rate of innovation in this area is going to be absolutely exponential. And the cloud space will look entirely different very, very quickly.
And yeah, just the impact. Like, it's going to be crazy.
In the new Terminator reboot, where the cloud pod mercilessly mocked AI and was first to be murdered by the AIs taking over the world, we'll remember this.
I'm just hoping it's slightly offset that I very frequently tell my Echo devices please and thank you. Like, that's I hope that maybe,
Well, I mean, I'm not doubting that doesn't help, but they're killing everybody. They don't care that you said please and thank you.
No, probably not. Yeah.
I don't know of any Terminators that were like, oh, they said please don't kill me, and
this guy's okay, right?
Yeah, it's fine.
I think we're in an interesting place right now because these models are very static. The ChatGPT is built on data that ended around about the end of 2021, so it's a little out of date. Mm-hmm. What they don't do, what none of them do as far as I know, at least the commercially available ones, are sort of update their own internal representations of knowledge based on the exchanges that they're having with users today. So it's very deterministic. I think like the next evolution of this stuff is going to be, well, now the models, now they do become conscious in a sense.
Do you think it has to get cheaper and more efficient for that to happen? Because it's still crazy expensive to retrain that model on a large data set.
Yeah. And I think the sort of sidestepping the requirement to retrain the entire thing from scratch and allowing it to incrementally update itself based on new information is going to be the next big game changer.
All right, let's move to Google, who also has AI stuff.
No way.
Yeah, shocker. Google has released a new cloud automation toolkit for healthcare organizations and previewed the MedPalm, PALM, to neural network capable of answering medical exam questions. And mostly what I take out of this is I hope WebMD updates to this new model very quickly so I can get something other than cancer after 3 questions.
Yeah, I mean, how hard is it to train a model just to return that it's probably cancer, which is what I assume this does.
All right, next story. Google is announcing the public preview of BigQuery Change Data Capture, or CDC, for those in the database space, to meet the evolving demands. This capability joins their existing data stream for BigQuery solution, which helps you seamlessly replicate data from a relational database such as MySQL, PostgreSQL, AlloyDB, and Oracle directly into BigQuery. Of course, that means that you're doing ETL type work through that data stream. That may not be good enough for you, and that you need actually to have every change made to every table tracked through CDC. And so BigQuery's native CDC support allows you to directly replicate, insert, update, and or delete changes from source systems into BigQuery without the complex DML merge-based ETL pipelines. Boo.
This really feels like the BigQuery team is just like almost like just challenging customer requests at this point. Like, fine, we'll incorporate every database functionality into this.
Yeah. Whatever you want with your data, we will now make it applicable. But
what's your next excuse?
My experience with CDC is, you basically capture the change data and you shove it onto a Kafka queue, and then you process it into BigQuery or into other, GCP storage solutions. So you can use BigQuery to query it. So you're definitely cutting out the middleman, which is super appreciated.
Mm-hmm. It's funny because it's not new technology. I mean, databases have replicated to each other. Nodes in their own clusters using streaming logs like this for literally decades. So I'm surprised it wasn't an existing feature, especially in updating something like BigQuery where you don't want to have to do bulk data loads of terabytes of data at a time. It makes total sense.
I think it's really the cost of BigQuery like solutions coming down, and for large data sets, right? And also license costs of a lot of the big enterprise database solutions going up. And so I think you're right, this is nothing new. If you think about a data migration service into a cloud, this is effectively a lot of the same sort of technology that's underlying all of that. But it's just not, now I think it's either an acceptance, as a community, we're like, oh no, that's a good idea, we can put that data over there for application use, or it's just becoming more cost effective. I can't tell.
Yeah, I remember using streams from DynamoDB and how useful that is, because we don't care when data doesn't change because nothing's changed, but we do care when stuff has changed. So having those hooks into changes in state is really important. So cool.
Yeah, I was just looking up SQL Server CDC. It came out with SQL 2008. So yeah, it's been around for a while.
Have you been waiting months and months to hire your new AWS, GCP, or Azure architect, only to have them be poached at the 11th hour by a startup with a juice bar? Initiatives stalled because you're having trouble hiring? Well, I have a simple solution: Foghorn Consulting. Foghorn Consulting provides top-notch cloud engineers to the world's most innovative companies and can be burning down your DevOps and cloud backlogs as soon as next week. Foghorn certified AWS, GCP, and Azure professionals are armed with infrastructure as code, and from day one will be designing performant, optimized cloud-native or hybrid environments that deliver on the promise of cloud. Their FogOps solution even provides on-demand cloud engineering to augment your existing teams. Visit www.foghornconsulting.com or send an email to cloudtalentnow@foghornconsulting.com and tell them the CloudPod sent you. Your dedicated FogOps team is with you for the long haul, and they bring their own juice.
And then moving on to Azure, who shockingly enough does not have an AI story this week. They actually did, but I couldn't be bothered to talk about it. I was like, I already talked about it twice today. I just can't add a third into the thing. But we do have a new Azure CNI overlay for your Azure Kubernetes service clusters. Apparently, this is a big step in addressing networking performance and the scaling needs of their customers. Apparently, customers have constantly been pushing the scale and performance boundaries of their existing networking in AKS and have needed faster throughput for their container workloads. Basically, the difference of this is that the prior implementation used the KubeNet plugin, which is an existing overlay network solution built on Azure Route Tables and the Bridge plugin. And it was only recommended for clusters of no more than 400 nodes or 200 nodes in a dual stack cluster. And so this new solution allows you to pull IPs out of the virtual net address space and then put an overlay on top of them to make it easy to define them. So there you go.
Yeah, these solutions they're kind of strange, right? Because it doesn't seem like a whole lot of much. But then how this actually manifests is, where you want to deploy a new cluster on Azure, and you realize that you have to, scale out your network to support a /16 or /17. Because it's got to have an addressable space for each one of your pods and containers. And sometimes the service itself doesn't let you sort of tailor that, right? Like EKS for a long time in Amazon, it was just defined. You had to deal with it. You couldn't deploy it into, you couldn't modify basically the network settings at all. So things like this really simplify that, right? Because you can run it, without needing that direct access to your network, and you can address the pods and stuff inside your cluster on isolated IP space. And if it doesn't need to talk directly to other infrastructure, you're good to go just as it is. So this is a great usability feature for AKS.
I think networking just needs to go away. Like all these constraints are just so bizarre. Like, okay, so we don't have these addresses to choose from. Like, what difference does it make? Like, from the perspective of communication between one service and another, what difference does it make what kind of address it has or where the address comes from or anything else? Like, what matters is this service, is this instance of this service running in a place that wants to talk to either a particular instance or any instance in another service. Like, that should all just completely disappear. It should all be invisible to anybody who cares about deploying and running applications in the cloud.
That is the dream, for sure.
Which is a great segue to this week's Cloud Journey. Where we're going to talk about Kubernetes and how does it support your cloud native architecture. And I guess my first question for both of you guys is, why does it have to be Kubernetes? Why? I'm an ECS fanboy. You guys know this.
Mm-hmm. Well, because the internet said it has to be Kubernetes. If it's not Kubernetes, it's not cool.
The entire technology industry has said it has to be Kubernetes. So not just the internet.
No, it's interesting because a lot of articles, you read out there are that it has to be, how do you build your app cloud native? Well, first thing you do is put it on Kubernetes. I'm like, no, that's not the first thing you do. The first thing you do is put it in a container. You manage your image via proper CI/CD. Like, what's this Kubernetes thing? You don't need any of that, and a lot of people miss that. They really skip ahead to the running of this application and don't really focus on what changes you need to make in your development cycle for a cloud native application. Like if you're going to prefer managed services, how are your devs going to develop? Are they going to exercise directly against the production service costing money, or do they need to have some way to replicate that service for local dev? Like these are key challenges that really need to be addressed up front. And I think that the Kubernetes sort of wave has really done a disservice to cloud native in that sense.
Yeah, I agree. And I think I'm still not entirely sure why Kubernetes has won the hearts and minds the way it has. I think part of it has to do with the prestige of companies like Google. Everyone wants to do things the Google way. Google, look at Google doing SRE, look at Google doing DevOps, look at Google doing all these cool things, and people are going to idolize the people and the processes and the tools that they build. And isn't it fantastic? And they've done a really great job of advocating for the tooling. Where's OpenShift? Where's the coolness around OpenShift? Nobody cares about OpenShift. It's old legacy stuff that you're running in a data center. Does anyone run OpenShift in the cloud? I have no idea.
If you're already in bed with Red Hat, maybe.
Yeah,
I think that's a lot of it. Kubernetes is open source. A lot of these solutions aren't.
Yeah. OpenShift
really is just Kubernetes under the hood, right? With some layers on top of it.
Right. So there's a lot of different things to choose from. There's ECS, there's Fargate, which is a slightly different type of abstraction, I guess, that takes care of the infrastructure as well. Mm-hmm. You could do Docker Swarm locally. Podman's a good solution for local development. There's lots of different ways to orchestrate containers, but Kubernetes has won. Kind of unfortunately, I think, because it's just so complex. It's great if you've got a team, just like deploying an application. In a data center, you've got a network team, you've got a virtualization team, you've got a systems team who spin up machines. It's great if you have that supporting infrastructure for a developer to spin up an app, because they have those people there to fulfill those roles. And I think Kubernetes just kind of brings in the same requirements, really, of you need a team to run it. You need to understand how it works. It's not simple. It doesn't do a lot of things that people think it does. Those are all plugins. Oh, you want ingress? Well, you have a controller for that. Oh, you want auto-scaling? You need a controller for that. It's really just a framework for orchestration more than the tool in itself, whereas I think ECS and Fargate, some of the other tools, are actually more complete solutions and probably easier for people to step into first.
No, I couldn't agree more.
I argued with Ryan for a very long time about Kubernetes versus ECS, and eventually won.
You did
and
win.
Then he drank the Kool-Aid, but we both admitted that Kubernetes is the future and everywhere everyone's going to go eventually. But for what we were trying to do, which was just run a container and needed basic orchestration, it was beautiful. ECS was great.
Well, you won't convince me that ECS wasn't the right answer. It's just that Kubernetes, despite being the wrong answer, is still the future, right? Because it's closer to managing your own hypervisors than it is a developer platform, and in my opinion. And we would never ask developers to support a local version of VMware or Zen to run their own VMs for local development, right? But yet we do expect them to do that with Kubernetes. And there's tooling and there's a lot of different options that are available to make it easier. But I think it's the wrong tool for the job, in my opinion.
I mean, I sort of feel like I really wanted serverless to be kind of a cloud native pattern of choice, but it took so long to fix things like cold start and to do things like Kubernetes really kind of filled the vacuum, and it simplified not having to worry about the eventing so much, because most dev teams just install eventing as Kafka and say we just send shit over there and hope for the best, versus actually really understanding how eventing is supposed to work. And so Kubernetes kind of became how do I run a server like workload without a server? And so it did really stifle some of the cloud native innovation that was happening in serverless. I still think serverless is long-term the right play. If you're, especially if you're trying greenfield today, I think serverless has a lot of value to you. But I do understand from the legacy pattern side that Kubernetes can add a lot of value to that. And really just containers in general. We talked about previously, I think last time we talked about Cloud Journeys, about Docker and how it made packaging easier, how it simplified microservices breakdown. So you got to have something to orchestrate it. I hope someday we get to the end of Kubernetes as this end all be all tool and say, look, we need something simpler and easier that just works. And maybe ECS has a new day in the sun.
Trying to rationalize services where you're using a deployment mechanism that's orchestrating a Kubernetes deployment that then has an operator that's calling infrastructure APIs to provision resources outside of that Kubernetes cluster. Like from a centralized platform team or providing cloud as a service, like I don't know how to do that safely. Like there's a lot there that is very complex and hard to put guardrails around.
I think that's some of the fear I have around some of the less sophisticated Kubernetes users out there who get excited about Helm, and then all of a sudden they're throwing in operators and things that are doing all kinds of craziness that you don't understand. Like it potentially could be an attack vector in the future for an enterprising hacker who wants to learn Kubernetes. There's potentially exploits that could be done that potentially are very damaging to your environment. So. Do be careful. As all technology has, there are sharp edges. But the other one that kind of comes up a lot once you get into Kubernetes is, okay, then how do I route my services between different pods and services? And that's where mesh kind of comes into play with this. And how does mesh ultimately help with this cloud native architecture?
Well, service mesh is ultimately just a layer in the sort of communication model. It's a network infrastructure layer. At least that's how I visualize it, which intercepts traffic leaving a service, performs, applies rules, and then manages moving that request or that data to an egress point for where it's ingested by another service, and it sort of facilitates the flow. And kind of going back to what I said about how networking needs to go away, service mesh is really the way that's going to be facilitated.
Service mesh is, if regular networking is role-based access control, service mesh is the attribute-based access control, and it's an abstraction of those things where if you're tagged a specific way and you have the right attributes, then you can access the other things that are tagged and have the right attributes, and it's a way to sort of simplify that communication, which is fantastic. Because then it really allows access to enable communication in a safe, prescriptive way without opening all the floodgates to everything or trying to hide everything behind a walled garden. But there's a ton of sharp edges and there's a ton of use cases. Like how do you bridge two mesh networks and all these things where there's still sort of these really hard questions that you have to answer. And I feel like a lot of the public documentation for cloud native application development and architecture guidance and really sort of glosses over that, right? So they give you all that rope, and then you get to a certain point and you're like, oh, this is going to be hard to integrate with, or this is going to be very difficult to do, workloads in different clouds, or whatever your challenges are.
Yeah, I felt like I need to apologize to all the people I've interviewed over the years when I've asked them questions about, what happens when you type google.com into a browser and press enter? And as much as I enjoy going into depth with people about the mechanics of how that works, all the way up the stack, I think service mesh, the goal of service mesh is to make that go away. I don't think application developers should have to be aware of those things in order to build reliable applications anymore. I think service mesh is ultimately the abstraction that means I don't need to ask that question anymore.
Yeah, I mean, that question was never pass-fail.
No, absolutely not. No.
Yeah, it was never pass-fail. But I mean, I also think you were talking about a developer, right? Like, as a front-end developer, there's actually a lot of interesting questions, because the beauty of the, type Google into a browser and hit go is, it can go any direction depending on what knowledge they have. But like in a front-end developer, like understanding how the DOM actually builds a web page and how it processes JavaScript and how it interacts, and actually being able to understand that and be able to explain it will actually help make you a better front-end developer. So there's still value in these things. We maybe get away from asking questions like, hey, how does the TCP/IP handshake happen between the SSL certificate? Like maybe some of that stuff changes in some of those conversations, but the core fundamentals of how that gets answered, I think it just gets more deep into different areas. And if you're interviewing with Jonathan, do go study the GitHub repo that has all of the possible connotations of how to answer this question what happens when you type in the browser. Because, and actually I have read that repo and there were things I didn't know.
Oh, tons.
So I learned a lot just reading through that too. But, the things I was always looking at was, for DevOps people was like, do you understand the networking? Do you understand how DNS functions? Because that's where a lot of the issues happen in DevOps. So that's where I was always focused on. But when you get into like how DOM processes and all that, like that's where I learned a lot, was just how that whole thing works. And I have a better respect for web browsers than I did before.
Yeah, no, there's so much that's happening locally that I know is there, but do not know anything else, right? Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, I've had some really good answers to that. Some very interesting answers, and in fact, answers that I couldn't really respond to because it's completely beyond my area of expertise. Had people talk about, actually, when you press enter on the keyboard, this message gets sent by the USB bus, and then it goes through all these kernel processes, and then hooks into this stuff. Like, wow, okay, I wasn't expecting that for this question, but that is a fantastic answer. Thank you very much. Yeah. But I mean,
just a look of fear on my face as an interviewer, like I got nothing on that. But
I mean, ultimately, as much as you want networking to go away, the physics of the real world still has to apply somewhere, and people building applications or services need to be aware of the constraints of the universe. Like, you cannot expect to send this image that somebody's uploaded from here to here in less than this amount of time. And so, as much as the connectivity issues go away, like the real world sort of consequences of the things that you do with the network will always still be in play.
I mean, you think about the strange cabal of the internet that is Icon, right? Like, it just gets abstracted to different layers. BGP advertising hasn't gone away, right? We just don't care anymore, right? Because it's all just sort of handled for us. And so I think that TCP handshake and SYNAC will sort of follow that same sort of paradigm, where it's like there is an old man with a very long beard who can explain that to you, and no one else.
In my day.
So you guys asked, as part of our brainstorming for this, we said, what are popular service mesh technologies? And I was thinking about how to ask that question to you guys. I'm like, well, aren't all of them just Istio based? Like, so my actual question to you guys, why are all of them based on Istio? Is there no other service mesh capability other than Istio?
I didn't realize that, like, all of them were. Like, that's definitely the one I know the most, but is like traffic and all that based on it?
I believe it is. Or at least had, at one point was forked off of something in Istio.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wish I hadn't written that question now, because beyond Istio, I don't know.
There's definitely, like, you can do some service meshy things in console, but that's really it's really more of like a gateway proxy than it is really. Yes, it does service meshy things, but it's not what I would consider a service mesh by definition, which is really what Istio is. Which the sidecars and being able to attach them and then basically tag your capability, and then be able to do routing and stuff based on this thing wants to talk to that thing, and I declared it, and so then magic happened, and now I have a connection. I
guess the other one I do know is Console Connect, which is a service mesh built on top of the existing service discovery tools that HashiCorp built. I'm not sure what kind of adoption that's got.
So as I just said that, it was very clear that you were thinking very hard about what that answer was.
Yeah.
And so you didn't hear me say console.
Console Connect.
That's all right. Yeah. I don't actually have an answer for that question, because I'm just thinking about it. Like, they're all based on Istio at the end of the day. And I think it's really, they all have different management interfaces to how you manage that tag routing partnership and how it integrates with hardware to do that. But yeah, well, interesting. Well, I think that's all I have on this topic. Do you guys have anything else you want to talk about with Kubernetes and this particular part of Cloud Native?
I mean, other than a general advice to abstract your container orchestration as much as possible.
Yes.
Right? Simplify your workloads and your use cases where you don't need very complex service mesh that talks to 27 different microservices across 19 regions.
And when you go Google for that, it says you'll find OpenShift. That doesn't mean just buy OpenShift. Like, think about it much more difficult, or much more thoroughly than that. So next week, we're going to keep going down on our cloud native conversation. We're going to talk about one of the trickier things, which is state. And actually, I think this might be a great place for Ryan and I to argue about the value of Zookeeper versus etcd versus console, which is just the biggest state problem of all.
True.
Is a fantastic thing, because we have had many, many long conversations about the bullshit that is Zookeeper. But, Ryan doesn't agree with me. So, yeah, that's a fun conversation. But anyways, so we can talk about that next week. And we'll see you guys all next week here at the Cloud Pod.
Good night.
Bye, everybody.
And that is the Week in Cloud. We'd like to thank our sponsor, Foghorn Consulting. Subscribe on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts, and tweet us your feedback at #TheCloudPod. Or join our Slack channel. Go to our website, thecloudpod.net, for sign-up instructions. I do have an after show for you guys. So we talked about Zuckerberg and his year of efficiency, of course.
Mm.
And so he's, this week he laid off another 4,000 employees. So, the year of efficiency continues. But there are some side effects of the year of efficiency that I picked up on. And so mass layoffs and absentee bosses create a moral crisis at Meta. Employees apparently are joking about being fired on internal Slack teams, and a rampant gallows humor now exists inside the company as they see meetings being scheduled with HR or different things and go, I'm fired. See you guys later. And they go to their HR meetings. Employees are also complaining, though, that where Meta's top executives have moved away from Silicon Valley, resulting in individual contributors and now no middle managers as they've been laid off, wandering around. And apparently Zuckerberg is off on paternity leave, that there's no one leading the ship at Facebook because there's no leadership there. Apparently, overall, between the layoffs, the absentee leadership, and concerns about the future strategic direction of Mark Zuckerberg himself has negatively hurt employee morale. Shocker, I tell you.
I mean, gallows humor is just how, any sane...
How we get through life and tech.
Yeah, any sane person deals with that, right? Like, good on them for, making the jokes. But, I'm frightened by the parallels that I see, when I was working for Yahoo in 2008. Like the absentee boss, the not knowing what to do, not being able to get a hold of anyone because they're just not around, or they're checked out, right? Because their mentality is, like trying to find what are they interested in, trying to evaluate where they stick around, right? They're not engaged in their job and really contributing. And it is sort of like, I feel for everyone that's still working at Meta because that sucks.
Yeah, in a way, it's kind of setting everyone up for failure. I mean, even people, even individual contributors who were engaged in their jobs, who were high performers, if they don't have that management structure, if they don't have the guidance, setting goals and monitoring performance, how can they possibly be successful?
Yeah, all that contribution is not visible.
How do you get the attention of the executive on the golf course? In Phoenix because he moved away. Like, what are you going to do?
Yeah. No, you're only going to get the attention of the executive or any kind of leadership team when you screw up, when there's a deadline missed, or when there's, some other negative consequence. And there's not going to be anyone at a lower rank who's there to sort of shepherd that from not happening or to be able to lay context or air cover. Like, it's awful.
Yeah.
I mean, I keep an eye on Blind and just seeing all of the negativity as these companies continue to lay off people. It's constant. Everyone's living in the state of fear, which is not good for people's health either. But we're up to 172,000 now in the in 2023. So it continues every day. Another 1,200 at Lyft, another 600 at F5. Open Door at 560. It's never ending. It seems right at this moment. So. If you're in tech, you're stressed. So then if you're in these, you get laid off from one company, you go to the next company. Now you're on the bottom of the list for the next layoff at that company. So it's just not a lot of confidence right now in the tech sector.
Yeah, I guess the only silver lining is that of the people who are remaining without good guidance, perhaps some of those people will step up and start being sort of unofficial team leaders and sort of fulfill those roles for people and be recognized for that in the future. But there's no guarantees for sure.
Well, will they be recognized, or will they do?
Or at least they're learning the skill set. Yeah.
They'll learn maybe they don't want to be a manager.
Yeah. Too soon.
That was a good follow up to our year of efficiency we talked about previously. So,
he better have some really good metrics coming in, Q3, Q4 this year, right?
I mean, he's got to hit his numbers Wall Street wise, man, or else he's going to get bludgeoned by the street. Yeah. So we'll see how that all works out for him. But he's on paternity leave right now. So what's really happening at Meta right now?
Right. And Sheryl Sandberg stepped down, right? So she was, she's kept that running for a long time. And I don't know who's there left that can really fill in for Mark. Yikes.
Yeah, I mean, after Cheryl left, you kind of you lost who was who was the number 2 in charge.
Who else? Yeah.
I'm sure they have them. They're just not as visible as she was. But yeah, she left in September 2022. So she's been gone, just a little bit over half a year now. So, But all right, guys, we'll talk to you later.
All right.
See you later.
See ya.